friends, welcome to Tuesday. I have the next section of Nuts to You for you today. When we left off, Jed had tricked the hawk into dropping him. He landed on a dog, bounced off, and he was laying unconscious far from home. Chapter 3. Meanwhile, back at the grove. Titi watched in disbelief as Jed was snatched up by the hawk. Through a thin thicket of raspberry canes she saw the blur of brown and white feathers, the all too clear scaly bands of the powerful yellow talons, as they curled around Jed's middle. She saw the surprise in her friend's eyes as his paws were lifted from the earth. She stared at the empty space where Jed had just been, and for a moment Titi was frozen. No, she thought, no, not Jed. She shook her head slightly. She shook it again, and then this time the movement freed her. She shot out of the thicket. She raced to the top of the nearest tree, out to the precarious tip of the limb that had lost its leaves. From there she could see her dear friend being carried away swiftly, so swiftly away. His form was a silhouette, a small shape with a long tail suspended below the larger hawk shape. Her heart began to fill with sorrow. Tears pooled in her eyes. But wait! What now? Were tears blurring her vision, or was the small form separating from the hawk's shape? It was falling away like a drop of water from the tip of a leaf, like the nut from a tree, like a squirrel. And if her eyes were not fooling her, the form did not fall like a limp, lifeless squirrel. It seemed to stretch out and then curl up tight. The curled up squirrel shape fell into some trees where she could no longer see it. But hope pushed its way into her heart. Stubbornly it took its place beside the sorrow. Now Chai joined her in the treetop. The slim limb dropped lower with his weight. He too had seen the capture of Jed. Following Titi's gaze, he watched the tiny silhouette of the hawk swoop and soar. He furled his tail over her shoulder in sympathy. "Let's go eat a nut," he said, "and remember our friend." "I think he escaped," Titi said. Chai pushed his cap and peered quizzically at her. "Titi," he said gently, "no one escapes from the talons of a hawk." "I saw him fall, Chai," she said. "The hawk dropped him just past the unnatural shape." "Which unnatural shape?" asked Chai. He could see 3 of them without even twitching his head: the huge silvery egg, the tall frozen spiderweb, and a great beak that sometimes sings but never opens. So looking at what these unnatural shapes are, I'm not sure what that is. Maybe like the top of the building. That looks like a electric pole, like a telephone pole. And that looks like maybe the top of a church. "The spider web," said Titi's, "but not the closest one, the one after that." Chai looked forward toward the way she was describing. It was a long way, a very long way, out of their realm. 3, maybe 4 realms away, and from a flying hawk in the air down to the earth was a very long way to fall. "If Jed escaped," he said to Titi, "no one is happier than I am. But we will never see him again." "He won't know where he is," said Titi. "He probably had his eyes shut the whole time. We need to find him and bring him home." "Are you nuts?" asked Chai. To squirrels, "Are you nuts?" is a combination of "Have you lost your mind?" and "You remind me of the most wonderful thing I can think of." Nuts by itself can actually mean many things, like hello, goodbye, or wow, kind of like shalom or aloha or cheers. In this case, also, "Are you nuts?" also meant "My friend, what you want to do is not even possible." From far below they heard Jip cry, "Hawk!" They looked at each other and rolled their eyes. Then they looked around and also straight up, just to be sure. "How would we even begin to find him?" asked Chai. "We can go on the buzz path," said Titi. "They connect the frozen spider webs. They hold them together or something." "They do?" said Chai. "How do you know?" "I went to the first one once, kind of by accident," said Titi. "They're attached, the buzz paths and the spider webs." "I'll be," said Chai. "I didn't know that." Probably you've already guessed that buzz paths are utility wires. So those are like the electric wires on poles. And the frozen spider webs are towers that hold them in the air. In this part of the forest, the trees had grown up around the buzz paths in a friendly, welcoming way, but their grove or neighborhood was midway between the spider webs, and Chai had never set foot on one. "So the buzz paths should take him right to him," said Titi. "We just have to count to the 3rd spider web." Chai studied his friend's face. He could see that she meant to go. He immediately felt he should go with her. Jed was his best friend, too. Also, 2 heads are better than 1, the buddy system, all that. But he had never done anything like it. He had never traveled so far from the grove. Plus, it seemed to Chai that if Jed had survived the fall, he would not have stayed put. He would have gone looking for food, shelter, and whatnot, scattered about. He's not going to just sit there waiting for us, he said. That's why we have to go right away, said Titi. Now, are you coming? I'm coming, said Chai, but he said it to thin air. Titi was already on her way, dropping from branch to branch. I'm coming, he yelled down after her. Wait! Come on, she called back. Over her shoulder, her voice already dimming with distance, muffled by laced fingers of the trees. Chai glanced down the grove. Everyone was running around back to normal. Chai loved everyone running around. He loved normal. Bye all, he said fondly, though no one could hear him. There was no time for real goodbyes. We'll be back, I hope. He found a drop of sap and dabbed it under the acorn beret to keep it in place. He checked to see that the sprig of goldenrod was still affixed to the hat at the jaunty angle. Then he stepped off the branch, looking at the spot where he would land. Step and land. That's all travel was. Throw in some running and a change of scenery, no big deal, right? And so off he went. Off they went together. Chapter 4. The Squirrels They Left Behind. Let's eat a nut, said Chubby, and remember our friend. The community of squirrels stood gathered around the feather that fell when the hawk snatched Jed. Jed's family, still in shock, huddled in a silent, sorrowful knot. Sherrit and Zek sang a soft, beautiful song about seasons and the cycle of life and how everything and everyone is part of it. They skipped over the verse about hawks. No one minded. No one wanted to hear lofty words about hawks today. Zek opened his mouth to tell how he had warned Jed, but Jed did not listen. Before he could speak, Dottie elbowed him in the ribs. She said fiercely, now is not the time. Jetty spoke of how much they would all miss Jed's common sense and great kindness. It was brief but heartfelt ceremony. The squirrels dispersed, leaving their feathers there as a remembrance of Jed, as well as a reminder of hawks. Chubby and Jetta, the elders, were last to leave the circle. Jed had been one of their favorites among the younger set, as well as their son's best friend. Where's Chai? Asked Chubby. And where's Titi? I don't know, said Jetta. It's very strange they didn't come. Very strange. We know where they are. Chapter 5. The Squirrel Who Fell to Earth. Sometime later, 3, maybe 4 realms away, Jed opened his eyes. He blinked in the dimness and thought, where am I? Then, remembering, he thought, oh, right. And then, but really, where am I? He made his way out from under the pile of leaves and looked around. It was a strange place. He tried to sort out what was strange about it from what wasn't. The leaves had a different aroma and a rounder shape than the kind he knew, but they were still leaves. The trees were a rougher bark, and their branches grew from the trunks in different arrangements, but they were still trees, right? The soil felt grainy under his paws, but it was still soil. The same sun shone in the sky. He was wondering what kind of nuts the trees might have, or if they even had nuts, when a pair of squirrels scurried by. Each one dragged a rounded item covered in petals, like flower petals, only brown and woody. The objects were almost as big as the squirrels themselves, who were smallish. Their fur had a reddish tint. So you can see these squirrels have pine cones, and it doesn't sound like he's ever seen pine cones before. Jed called out, and they halted in their tracks. They turned to him, curious. One of them set down his woody orb and spoke. At first, Jed thought he was speaking another language, but as he listened, he realized it was just a strong accent. Maybe there were some words he didn't know. Slang words, maybe. He spoke back, and the 2 squirrels laughed. Not in a mean way. Where are you from, then? Said the largest one. I'm Chuck, right? I'm Zom, said the other. And you're? What? Said Jed. Oh, Jed. Call me Jed. Then he tried. I'm Jed. And all 3 of them laughed. Zom and Chuck said, ow, just as they said, ow, they were just about to down and woot, he could come along. Jed said that he would, so they were asking him if they wanted to come along. Jed said that he would, and they led him to a picnic area where several squirrels were already eating. They sat around a careless heap of woody orbs. Jed watched how they yanked the petals off and nibbled the seeds that were hidden beneath. Chuck nodded his head toward the pile and said, Go on, John, try one of them. Or go on, Jed, try one of them. Tentatively, Jed pulled one of the orbs closer. He grabbed a petal with his teeth and yanked it away. He took a nibble of the small, dry seed. It wasn't bad. Kind of weird at first, but Jed's mother had taught them that the rule of 3 bites, and by the 3rd bite, it tasted pretty good. dish then?" he asked. "We call it pine cones," said Jed. "So spit it out then," said Jed. "Spit it out?" said Jed, who had already swallowed it. "Your story," said Chuck. "Tell us where you're from, where you're not from. We need to know it all." "Oh," said Jed, right. Well," he told them his story from the squirrel who cried wolf right down to the bouncing of the unfortunate dog. They listened, spellbound. Mostly Jed had the feeling that some of the squirrels thought he was making it all up. "I don't blame you if you don't believe me," he said. "I wouldn't believe it myself, except that's the way it happened," he said without trying to imitate the reddish accent. There was a silence of those pauses where no one knows what to say next. Then one of the squirrels let out a woof. It was a joke, and off they all went, laughing and chattering, except for Chuck. "Bunch of sillies," said Chuck. "Every mess has 'em. It seems we got more 'n our share. Don't mind 'em, though. They mean well enough. They just got to get used to you. You make yourself at home. You'll be right before you know it." Chuck knew of a good hole midway up a hornbeam tree where Jed could make a nest. He started right in, gathering up twigs and feathers and leaves, chattering all the while about this and that. Jed gathered too, though he thought Chuck might be overdoing it. "It doesn't have to be a really good nest," he said. "I won't be staying for long." Chuck looked at him amused. "Where'll you be going then?" he said. "Is that hawk coming by to carry you back home? Let me know when he comes so I can kind of hide." He said this in a jolly way, and busied himself with some wisps of duck down, humming as he worked. But his jolly words put a new thought in Jed's mind. Up until now it had all been, "Wow, I'm alive, and where am I, and who are you?" But here it was like a gray, cold cloud. He wasn't going home. Maybe ever. How could he? He had no idea where he was. He carried a wad of milkweed fluff up into the den and pulled it apart, dropping the silky fibers onto the heap. He took a long time to do it because his face kept going into weird shapes and puddles kept forming in his eyes. When he went outside again, Chuck wasn't there, but he left a big pile of bedding and a smaller pile of snacks at the base of the tree. As Jed popped a seed into his mouth, two of the reddish squirrels scooted by. One of them shouted, "Archibald then, Jed." I don't even know what that was supposed to be. Or something like that. Jed couldn't make it out. But it sounded friendly. Maybe it was even a joke, so he flashed a big fake grin. He chuckled. He chuckled and grinned a lot that day. Sometimes he got the joke, sometimes he didn't. Chuck showed him where things went, where things were, told them who was who and what was what. Jed tried to keep busy, very busy. Sometimes he raced to the top of the tree and back down several times in a row, just to wear out his feelings. When daylight dwindled and darkness sifted down, he was so tired he could barely stand up. He perched on the limb outside his new den, while scraps of chatter filled the air around him, looming and fading like the lights from fireflies. Finally all was still. Jed crawled into his new nest and curled up. He closed his eyes. He could not sleep, though, nor right away. His mind filled with thoughts of home, the aroma of oak, the taste of nuts, and most of all the voices and faces of his friends, his family, his neighbors, especially his pals, Chai and Tee, but even Jip. Would he ever see them again? It seemed crazy. Was it true? He scolded himself. Maybe this is my home now, and it's a good enough place, better than the belly of a hawk. He tried to ignore the feather of longing that tickled in his heart, but it kept tickling, because he hadn't quite made up his mind to stay here. Why should I stay? It's not my home. Maybe I'll stay, maybe I won't, he thought. Maybe I'll just get up in the morning and, I don't know, He couldn't think what he would do. He felt sure he would do something, though. First thing, comforted by that idea, he drifted off. He let go of the day and all that had happened. His body relaxed and his mind went dark, awaiting the story music of his dreams. He slept. And then we will read the next part tomorrow.